Good morning. I have the pleasure to be here today with a colleague of ours who's going to share a very personal experience with all of us. My name is Carlos Salaquet. I'm the president of the Inter-American Society of Psychology, also known as Sociedad Interamericana de Psicología. Y he tenido el privilegio de escuchar de mi colega Viviane de Castro Picanha, who's a Brazilian psychologist and researcher, clinical psychologist and researcher, who is now living in New York. She is also the director of the Professional School of Psychology in Chicago, the Chicago Professional Schools of Psychology. And she is with us because she's going to share her experience with the COVID-19. Viviane, a pleasure having with you, this conversation with you and ready to learn from what you have been going through.
Thank you so much, Carlos. I'm really humble and honored by your invitation to share the experience I'm going through with our brothers and sisters of the Inter-American Society of Psychology. It's really a privilege to be here with you and to share my own experiences. I mean, what is really the purpose of our lives if we cannot learn from the adversities we encounter along the way, right? But not only learning, but also helping others to go through the hardships that they encounter in their lives to help them make sense, manage, and even overcome their struggles. I'm the type of person that looks into the bright side of life, even though the sky may be or may seem to be falling down on us. I mean, it's not always easy to do that, especially in this past months, where it has been difficult to put into perspective and to look the bright side of life.
I imagine
the challenges with
I know.
COVID-19.
That's the reason why I really wanted to learn from your experience. How did you find out about the infestation? Because in a sense, you got contaminated at a time where little was known. Because it was very early, you were in New York, and so what happened?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed, this was back to March 22nd. It seems it seems that several months passed already because of the intensity of everything that we have been living. But it's only like, it's going to complete like a month. Well, the symptoms really started like 3 to 4 days prior receiving the diagnosis. Like I started to feel like a strong sore throat, difficultness to swallow. I started to feel that my body was very tired. And then like my throat started to ache and burn. And the night prior to the diagnosis, I had like a high fever. It was like about like 40 Celsius or like 104 Fahrenheit. So that night was pretty difficult. But before I share, I continue to share my experience with COVID-19. I also have to share with our brothers and sisters that I also have a pre-existing disorder that it's called myasthenia gravis. And because of that, I have been taking corticosteroids and immunosuppressant medications for the past 11 years. So I was diagnosed with this disorder when I was in my middle 20s. And basically, this disorder affects my entire body, the voluntary muscles, and the worst form can impact the involuntary muscles. It's autoimmune disorder that causes fatigue, exhaustion, and in its worst form, it can affect my heartbeats, the respiratory system, and the process involved in swallowing. Even like, swallowing saliva is difficult, and I can choke on saliva. So it's kind of, a condition that I need to pay attention. So when I felt all the symptoms of COVID-19, I knew that I had to make the difficult decision of going to the hospital. And like you mentioned, it was a difficult decision because I'm living now in one of the places that has been affected the most by the virus. I'm here in New York City. So before going to the hospital, what I did was to schedule an appointment with a medical doctor of a hospital that it's like 3 blocks away from where I live. This hospital is called Mount Sinai. And when I did the online appointment with the medical doctor, he said that he was concerned about the worsening of the myasthenia gravis symptoms. So he said that he wanted me to come to the hospital. I mean, just the idea of going to the hospital was really terrorizing. So it was difficult, but I knew that this was needed and I had to go there. So I went to the hospital, they did my blood test, they monitored my vital signs for about like 24 hours. I tested positive for COVID-19, and after 20 hours being there, they decided to release me because I didn't have problems breathing. So this was the most important sign. But at the same time, they continued to monitor me online. And they were monitoring via online appointments, and they were asking me, how I was doing. They, of course, gave me medication to all of the symptoms I was feeling. So this was like the beginning, right? This is when I heard, and my first reaction. I knew it was needed. I knew I had to stay focused to take care of myself, although I was just terrorized by it.
Of course. Now, you're a psychologist, and I understand that the physicians are monitoring you, and I'm assuming they use cellular phones or something like that to monitor your symptoms and your condition. But what was going through not only your head, but your heart? What was the psychological reaction?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. It's quite interesting how our mind works, and the thousands of thoughts that were, every minute coming to my mind of, the fear of what is going to happen. Do I need to be in a ventilator? Are the medication that they were prescribing to me going to help decrease the fever, help, for the myasthenia gravis symptoms. So a lot was going through my mind. I mean, and it was a difficult moment. But I I forced myself to stay focused. And one of the things that really helped me staying focused was something that I have been doing for a long time, for several years in my life. I encounter mindfulness in my life. And this was when I was doing volunteer work in Nepal and India several years ago. And I realized that trying to connect with myself helped me stay centered. I mean, it's not easy to do that. And even like the idea of doing meditation in the beginning for me was very odd, because I'm a very fast-paced person. For those that know me, I am like, a multitasker, like I'm boom, 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 do this, do that, and do that. I mean, really, driven focus. And the idea of that really irritated me, if that makes sense. But I knew it was for me. I knew, it was a call for me. So I have been doing this for several years in my life. And I have to tell you that meditating and using, the mindfulness tools help me reconnect with myself and to stay centered. And to really, put into perspective the negative thoughts, and if they really translated into the reality I was thinking, or if they were just like, an escalation of pessimistic thoughts. And this process really helped me throughout the way. But not only that, I mean, there's so many other things that help me, like listening.
Wait. I hear you. And I understand that the fact that you have done mindfulness for 10 years was a great tool. And I know you have used other techniques, and we're going to talk about them. But before we get there, you mentioned the word terrorizing, meaning just knowing. So walk me through that first moments. I personally would have thought, gosh, am I going to die? I mean, truly, the news about the COVID had been devastating. And you mentioned that you have a pre-existing condition, so increases your vulnerability. So I'm curious to know more about that particular moment, and what did you go through?
Yeah, at the moment, I mean, prior to the moment of the diagnosis, I knew something was wrong. I knew something was really, really wrong, because I never felt like the pain that I was feeling. It was like a horrible pain in my entire body. To the point that you cannot even talk. You cannot even, think straight. I could barely walk. Even like, eating, I had to force myself to eat. So, of course, I mean, I'm a human being. I had all these thoughts. But I guess, I kind of trained my body and my mind during all these years, during meditation. I trained my body that when there is a crisis, when there is like something that really threatens my well-being, I need to stop and see the situation in perspective.
I see.
And I know it sounds, kind of strange, and it is really strange because, when everything is falling down, what I was trying to do is like, okay, I I need to calm down. I need to, decrease my heartbeat, decrease my anxiety. I was feeling a lot anxious. When I knew I had to go to the hospital, I froze. I had so much going on my mind. It was difficult to concentrate. But after that happened, I then went to this place on my mind where I said, I need to find a strategy to help me get back connected with me, to help me stay centered. So it is difficult to do that because it was kind of a fight of feeling, terrorized. At the same time, I need to stay centered and I need to find out something to help me here. It was like, a life decision, like if that makes sense. So with like this training, I helped me get back connected with myself. I wrote down like what I needed to do. Rather than just being on my mind, I wrote down all the steps that I had to do. And I was reading and, reminding me, okay, I need to do this. I need to go to the hospital. I need to tell the medical doctors this. And during, the time I was in the hospital, it was again, frightening because I didn't know if I was going to be released or not, if I was going to put on a ventilator or not. I knew that if I let my anxiety control me, I knew that I could easily hyperventilate and my level of oxygen in my blood would saturate and probably I had to be put on a ventilator. Not only because of that, but also because especially because of myasthenia gravis, when I increase anxiety, and I feel, panic, and I feel that I'm hyperventilating, that decreases my body strength. And then, I go to a place that it's difficult to come back. So I was trying to use like breathing techniques. And the breathing techniques, just the simple exercises of taking a deep breath and then, breathing out was helping me to not hyperventilate and not go into panic mode. And I guess, that was also so important during the time that they were monitoring, myself for 24 hours, because I could easily be, my time in the hospital could easily be, extended if I was panicking, if I was not able, to stay calm. So, and thinking also about, others that I have in my life that were always supportive. My husband was there with me, all of the time. He was also diagnosed with COVID. Yeah. And it was difficult for him too. He has been through many episodes and crises of myasthenia. Like I said, I was diagnosed when I was in my middle 20s. So he knows, and it's frightening for him too. But at the same time, I was helping myself with, breathing techniques and relaxation techniques. I was also doing that. I was also helping him do that, because it was not easy for him at all to to
yeah.
take all of that in his shoulders. Yeah.
Now, in a process like this, when usually there is an internal dialogue going on, you know, on the one hand, and you mentioned it in a way, you say, on the one hand, you know, I was afraid, but on the other hand, I knew I needed to do something about this. Can you share a little bit of what was going on in your head?
Yeah, I mean, it was really, you know, one of the biggest fights I had. And I think, you know, it was one of the biggest fights. I say it was one of the biggest fights because in the past, prior to learning how to stay connected with myself, how to stay, you know, calm, I was always like allowing anxiety to take control, like all these thoughts of what it's going to happen to me, how many days I'm going to stay in the hospital. If I stay, you know, more than, I don't know, like a week, or if they put me on a ventilator, how long am I going to be here? And I was always, you know, recalling the news and what the people were saying in the news. If you're staying in the ventilator over, like, you know, an X amount of days, the chances of you getting out of the ventilator go down. And so all of those negative thoughts were trying, you know, to control my mind. And that's what I say, you know, was one of the biggest fights. And a fight that was an internal with my inner self of putting into perspective and trying to bringing me back to reality. One of the things that I learned and I have been practicing for a while is to be kind to myself.
Oh, great.
To be compassionate. So even like the tone of voice I was using to calm me down was a tone of voice of someone that really cares, rather than someone demanding, you know, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to stay centered. No, it was always like, it's time to take care of you. You know, it was always like trying to look at myself with a big smile and say, I'm here for you, you know. And I felt myself doing this. I find myself doing this.
Embracing yourself.
Yeah, and hugging.
Taking a hug. Very good, very good. And so you are going through all this, you go to the hospital, they diagnose you, they check, and then they let you go back home.
Yes, because...
What happened since then?
Yeah, so I came back home, and of course I was taking medication. It took several days for the high fever to come down, to go down. I would say that it took about 11 days. The high fever was going on for about 11 days. And the body ache, I mean, horrible body ache and horrible migraine. I mean, my head was pounding and pounding and pounding. And I was taking medication. And even with the medication, all the symptoms were like minimally going down, to the point that they gave me pain medication and for a medication for fever. So I was taking like every other hours, every other 3 hours, I was taking one medication. And every other 3 hours I was taking another medication, because they were afraid that like that could put like, you know, that would like make my liver, that could cause damage to my liver because of all the medication.
All the medication, good.
So my body was shivering. Like I said, I could barely walk. I could barely open my eyes. I could barely talk. And there was a time that was also really frightening, that after 5 days taking the medication, the medication was over, and we tried to get the medication in the pharmacies, but they were gone. Like there was no medication. I know it's kind of impossible to believe that because I am in New York City, but there was no medication in New York City. So we had to order the medication from another state, and we stayed without medication for probably like, it was almost 2 days without medication.
2 days?
2 days, almost 2 days without medication. Yeah. Until the medication arrived from another state.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even like, you know, paracetamol, which is, you know, you can find paracetamol in every corner, and you can imagine how many pharmacies are in New York City, but there was none.
Completely.
Yeah. So all the symptoms, they progressed, and they stayed with us for a long time. After 15 days, I started to have like a lot of back pain. And talking to my medical doctor, he diagnosed a pneumonia. So I'm still fighting a pneumonia as we speak.
After a month of all this?
Yeah, I'm taking, you know, medication for pneumonia. I'm taking antibiotic, but it's still, I mean, probably I will stay longer in this medication, but it's also because I have myasthenia gravis. Because my body responds different to the medication. My immune system is suppressed because of taking corticosteroids and immunosuppressants for the past 11 years. So, of course, we need to, when I'm saying this and sharing with our brothers and sisters, it's not that it's going to be the same with everyone, but when you do have another disorder, it can impact, like, and the body may take longer to recover. In the case of my husband, I mean, he also had high fever for a very long period of time. And even the medication was not bringing the high fever down. So it takes longer for him. But for me, I know that I'm still in recovery, and I need to be patient because it will take much longer for me to recover. So I still need to be kind. I still need to be patient. I know that the fast pace and my you know, multitasking abilities, I will need to have a different expectation of what I will be able to do in terms of, like, you know, work, in terms of home, even in terms of, you know, my own recovery. And it's difficult because sometimes I want to, you know, do what I was doing prior to getting sick. But if I do that, if I overdo, if I go near my limits, I know I will get sick again, and then, you know, it will be difficult to recover. So I need to balance, I need to dose the amount of work per day I need to, and I still practicing, being kind and being compassion and being self-compassion, because if I go to the other side of demanding, I feel my body, shutting down.
Now, I hear that part also, but as I read about the symptoms of the coronavirus and how it progress, is not a steady recovery. It's sort of like a bumpy road. How has that been for you?
Yes, I actually, it's so interesting that you mentioned that, because after even like 4 days without feeling, the horrible migraines or the body aching, you feel like, I'm ready, I'm healthy, this is gone. And this is also what my husband was telling me. But all of a sudden, the symptoms come back. Yeah. And you wonder, what is going on? I mean, I was feeling good yesterday. I was feeling healthy. We were not taking, the pain medication anymore. Like even last week, I felt really well for 4 days without taking the pain medication. And all of a sudden, the symptoms came back. And I mean, this is like frightening. Why I'm feeling that again? I was feeling really well.
Really well.
But this is how the course of the symptoms they go. I spoke with the medical doctor from the hospital that I'm being monitored, and they told me that the symptoms, they come back even after feeling well for weeks. The symptoms may come back even after months you're feeling well. And the symptoms, they come back pretty hard, to the point that you need to take the pain medication again. So it is really energy draining, emotionally draining, because you feel you're healthy, but then you feel you're sick again. And that's why I say, we need to be kind and patient, because even after a month of, well, I cannot say it has been like a week or 2 weeks that I'm feeling much better. But again, I still feel my body aching. I still feel, the back pain. This is something that really bothers me. Some days I'm feeling better, but some days, the back pain really bothers me. And of course, I keep checking my breathing, because I'm fighting a pneumonia.
Right.
But it's also important, to be attentive when we are checking our breathing, because when we focus our attention to breathing, sometimes you can hyperventilate because you're giving too much attention to your breathing. So it's important, to be attentive, just that you're breathing in, you're breathing out, rather than just like escalating, or even like increasing the number of breathings, because when we do that, we create a panic attack.
I understand. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, for the sake of time, because
Sure.
this interview is around 30 minutes. So let me ask you, what else should I ask you that I haven't? And then what lessons, have you learned through all this process, and you will share with potential psychologists and other mental health professionals who may get contaminated with the coronavirus, but also who may work with clients who are affected by the same coronavirus, and help them understand what the clients are going through?
Yeah, no, this is such an important question, my friend. I think, as mental health professionals, we tend to go above and beyond our own limits to help others. So it's really important to acknowledge our own needs to take care of ourselves. Otherwise, we get sick. So if you get the diagnosis of COVID-19, I think, it's important to understand that you will go through a period that you need to put in practice self-care strategies. You need to, think about you in the first place. I mean, we are not training like to be Wonder Womans or Supermans, right? I mean, we are human beings. We have needs, we have fears, we have dreams. So it's important, to be kind and compassionate to us through this moment of sickness. And I know others will need you, but if you don't take care of yourself now, you will not be able to take care of others. So put yourself in the first place, and do whatever you need to do to help you to take care of yourself. So when taking care of others, especially, people that has been going through trauma or significant, life distress, it's more important that we keep in mind that can cause us something that it's called compassion fatigue, that it's called vicarious trauma. So we get sick because we have been caring for others that are going through trauma. So be attentive to the signs of your body and, your mind as well. Because again, we tend to go over our limits. That's our nature as psychologists, as mental health professionals. We focus on others. But it's important to take care of ourselves, because if we don't, there will not be a time to take care of others. And when taking care of others, go through their own diagnosis of COVID, sometimes, being present, using empathetic listening, smiling. In some cultures, it's not appropriate, to physically give a hug or to give a kiss. So of course, you need to be attentive to your own cultural practices. But in cultures like, our own Latin cultures, where we can give a hug. So, demonstrating, that can really mean something. Although, if someone is sick, we need to maintain the distance. It's important to use the masks. It's important to use the gloves. So if you're there with a client and you are, for instance, providing online services, give a hug like this, or give a smile. Use like a humanistic approach. Be present with, being the moment with your clients. And if you are providing services to clients with COVID in the hospital, instead of giving a hug to the client, you can just do this and show your client that this is what you're feeling, and this is what you know, you would like to do in a normal circumstance. So it's important to really be human and share our common humanity with others, letting others, know that we are all the same. We are in the same boat. We are here to help one another, trying to find like what makes sense to us, to help us go through this crisis. Something that really is helping me is, for instance, learning about the many initiatives around the world of organizations devoting their time to help others in vulnerable conditions. We are so privileged to be where we are, but there are others that are not able to even practice social distance because they live in a small room, or they live in refugee camps, or they live in areas there they cannot, distance themselves from others. So putting into perspective when we are going on through our own lives helps us understand what our others are going through. And even, wishing well to all these communities around the world, wishing well to our brothers and sisters, like wishing that they are in peace, wishing that they are healthy, wishing that they are well, can help this positive energy, and this shared solidarity that we have inside of us. So this is, something that is helping me. Of course, for each of us will be different. So find what makes sense to you to help you go through this moment.
Very good. So I take a number of lessons. On the one hand, you have been using a lot of the practices that we in our professions value, and they became very useful in your own experience. That, of course, can be related to explain to others who may want to find better ways to maintain the breathing in addition to medication and other procedures that the medical doctor will provide. And within boundaries. On the one hand, do it kindly to yourself, because if you overdo it, then you go into hyperventilation. Also this idea that we understand privilege. We can do it because we are trained on all these practices, and we use them, because sometimes we don't. And in addition to that, the idea of being cultural, mindful, so culturally sensitive to the different practices that other people may use, the focus in inwards and in others, like for example, your husband, to help him also, and vice versa. So is this idea of taking time to deal with this and to recoup, because if you are well, then you can help others, as opposite to overdoing it and not only not getting well, but also not being able to help others. And then the issue of being helped by others. I can see the medical doctor following up with you and maintaining clear communication and follow-up, which is fantastic, because with the amount of work they have. So thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate it. Take care of your pneumonia, because that's not fun. But on the other hand, what a privilege to hear about your experience and learn from within. Because it's a different thing to talk about what persons may go through something like this than to speak from within, because you are still battling with all the aftermath of the early diagnosis and tentative treatment. So my heart goes out and my love goes out to you. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much, my dear friend. And if anyone would like to connect with me, please feel free to share my contact information. I mean, if we are life, we have a purpose in life, right? To be connected with one another and to help others. So I'm here. If I can help anyone, I'm here to help.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.